She never imagined that a normal evening shift would end in terror. The clatter of dishes, the soft jazz in the restaurant. Everything felt ordinary until it wasn't. Moments later, she'd be fighting for air inside a cold, tiled bathroom, with her manager's hand gripping her collar. Her name was Alana, 26, hardworking, quiet, the kind of woman who believed effort spoke louder than words. But tonight words wouldn't save her. When she spilled a drink on the wrong customer, her manager's face darkened. The humiliation he felt wasn't about the spill. It was about her skin, her confidence, the quiet way she carried herself. No one saw him drag her away. No one heard the struggle behind the locked door. But across the restaurant, someone else did notice her sudden absence. A man in a gray suit, calm, silent, dangerous, raised his head from his drink. He wasn't just another guest. He was her husband, and he was about to show everyone what happens when power meets cruelty. For Alana, the restaurant was more than just a job. It was survival. Every shift meant rent, groceries, and a few dollars saved for a dream she never dared to say out loud. She was used to the noise, the laughter, the chatter, the clinking glasses, all blending into the rhythm of her second home. She'd worked there for almost 3 years. Through long hours and aching feet, she'd learned how to smile through exhaustion, how to make rude customers feel served, and how to stay invisible when tempers flared. But invisibility came at a cost. It meant swallowing insults disguised as jokes, pretending not to notice when people looked at her differently. Her manager, Rick Dalton, was the kind who enjoyed control. He had the type of smile that made people uneasy, sharp, insincere, lingering too long. The kind that promised trouble. He liked reminding everyone who was in charge, especially her. "Don't mess up," he'd whisper as he walked by. "You know how fast people like you get replaced." That night, Alana had arrived early. Crisp uniform, polished shoes, hair tied neatly back. Her husband, Marcus, had insisted on dropping her off. He'd kissed her forehead and said, "Don't stay late tonight, baby. You've been running yourself dry." She laughed softly, assuring him it was just another shift. He didn't argue, but his eyes lingered, protective, calculating, as if he sensed something she didn't. Inside, the evening began smoothly. Couples filled the tables, the jazz band played, and the air smelled of roasted garlic and wine. Alana moved gracefully between guests, her tray balanced perfectly. Then it happened. A glass of red wine tipped, spilling across a businessman's suit. A gasp, a flinch, a slow turn of heads. The customer barked at her, his voice loud enough to silence the room. Rick appeared almost instantly, that false smile already spreading. "Step inside," he muttered, pointing toward the hallway that led to the bathrooms. Her chest tightened. She tried to explain, but his tone left no room for words. Every step she took down that narrow corridor felt heavier, the laughter and music fading behind her. No one stopped her. No one questioned why she looked so pale. And no one noticed the man at the corner table slowly set his glass down, eyes narrowing as he watched her disappear behind the door. The hallway was narrow, lined with old photos of the restaurant's early days, smiling faces that seemed to mock her now. Alana's hands trembled as she followed Rick toward the bathroom. She could feel her pulse in her throat, her instincts screaming that this wasn't just about spilled wine. Rick pushed the bathroom door open with unnecessary force. The bright, sterile light stung her eyes. "You've really outdone yourself tonight," he sneered, letting the door slam shut behind them. "Do you know how embarrassing that was? In front of everyone?" I said I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice thin. "It was an accident." He stepped closer. The sharp scent of cologne mixed with whiskey hit her nose. "You always have excuses, don't you? You think being nice gets you out of everything?" She shook her head, trying to keep her composure. But then his tone shifted, lower, colder. "You know, I could have fired you weeks ago, but I didn't. You should be grateful for that." He reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her face. She flinched back instantly, her breath catching. "Don't," she said, firmer now. That single word broke something in him. The mask slipped. His eyes darkened. "You're lucky I even let you work here," he hissed, grabbing her by the arm. The sudden force made her stumble against the sink. Outside, the restaurant buzzed on, oblivious. But Marcus, still seated at the far table, noticed the change in sound, the subtle quiet where Alana's soft voice should have been, the empty space near the bar where she usually stood. His instincts sharpened like a blade. Marcus wasn't a man who panicked. Years of living in the shadows had taught him patience and control. But beneath that calm exterior was something dangerous, something few people had ever seen and lived to describe. He stood, sliding a few bills onto the table. His men at the corner booth exchanged looks, silent communication between predators. Marcus nodded once, and they followed without question. Inside the bathroom, Alana tried to push past Rick, but his grip tightened. "You don't walk away from me when I'm talking," he spat. The veins on his neck bulged. "Please," she said, tears forming. "Let go, I'll leave." He shoved her back against the tiled wall, his face inches from hers. "You'll do what I say, or I'll make sure you never work again. Do you understand?" A tear slipped down her cheek. Her heart pounded so loud it drowned out his words. But then footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, getting closer. Rick froze for a moment, then turned toward the sound. The door creaked open. Marcus stood there. No expression, no words. Just cold, absolute silence. Behind him, two of his men waited, blocking the hallway. "Who the hell are you?" Rick barked, his hand still gripping Alana's collar. Marcus's eyes lowered to that hand, then back to Rick's face. Slow, measured. "Let her go," he said quietly. Rick hesitated, smirking, and a fatal mistake. "You can't just walk in here like you own the place." He didn't finish. Marcus stepped forward, grabbing his wrist with effortless strength, twisting it until Rick cried out and fell to his knees. Alana stumbled free, gasping for air, clutching her chest. "Did he touch you?" Marcus asked her, voice calm but trembling with contained rage. She couldn't answer, just nodded, tears streaming. Marcus turned back to Rick. "You made two mistakes tonight," he said softly. "You disrespected my wife, and you thought no one was watching." The fluorescent light flickered, shadows slicing across their faces. Rick tried to stammer an apology, but Marcus's silence was louder than any threat. His men moved in, not to strike, but to ensure no one entered. Outside, laughter and music continued as if nothing had happened. But behind that locked door, justice, raw, unfiltered, was about to take form. Rick looked up, eyes wide with sudden fear. "Please, I didn't know." Marcus leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only Alana could hear. "That's the problem," he said. "People like him never do until it's too late." And with that, the night changed forever. Rick's knees hit the tile with a sharp crack, echoing through the narrow bathroom. The sound seemed to pull the air out of the room. Alana stood frozen near the mirror, trembling, one hand pressed against the sink for balance. Marcus didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence filled every inch of that cold, fluorescent space, calm, controlled, terrifying in its silence. Rick tried to pull back, but Marcus's grip tightened around his wrist. "You think you can lay hands on a woman who works for you?" His tone was steady, each word cutting through the air like steel. "You think power means you get to humiliate people who can't fight back?" Rick opened his mouth, desperate, but no sound came out. The weight of Marcus's stare crushed him. Behind Marcus, one of his men quietly closed the door. The sound of the latch locking was final. "Please," Rick stammered finally, his voice breaking. "I didn't know." She didn't say. Marcus leaned down, his face inches from Rick's. "Didn't know what?" he asked softly. "That she was human? That she had someone who'd burn the world for her?" The lights flickered again. The mirror behind Alana caught Marcus's reflection. The calm of a man who'd seen too much, done too much, but would never let harm touch what he loved. Alana wanted to speak, to stop him, but her voice was trapped in her throat. The fear, the shame, the months of quiet abuse and humiliation, it all hit her at once. And for the first time, she saw someone standing up for her with the kind of strength she'd only dreamed of having. Marcus finally released Rick's wrist. The man fell backward, clutching his arm, gasping for air. His arrogance was gone. All that remained was trembling panic. Marcus straightened his suit, his movements precise, deliberate. "You're going to walk out there," he said, voice low. "And you're going to apologize to every single person who heard you humiliate her. Then you're going to hand her the cash in your pocket, every dollar. Because tonight you pay for what you did." Rick shook his head, tears welling. "Please, Marcus's jaw tightened. He didn't raise a hand again. He didn't have to. The silent menace in his eyes did the work. Slowly, shaking, Rick reached into his wallet, pulling out the folded bills and dropping them onto the floor. Marcus glanced at Alana. "Pick it up," he said quietly. "You earned it." Her hand hesitated. "Marcus, His expression softened for the first time that night. "You walk out of here with your head high," he said. "You don't ever let a man like this make you feel small again." Rick slumped against the wall, defeated. The men at the door stepped aside as Marcus gently placed a hand on Alana's back, guiding her out. The restaurant's noise returned like a wave. Laughter, music, clinking glasses, all oblivious to the storm that had just passed a few steps away. As they walked through the room, people turned, whispering, sensing the energy but not daring to ask. Marcus stopped near the exit, looked back once and met Rick's eyes through the open doorway. A single look and calm, cold final. Rick understood. That was mercy, the kind that came from a man who could have destroyed him, but chose restraint instead. Outside, the night air was cool. Alana's hand still trembled, but Marcus's arm around her shoulders steadied her. The hum of city traffic filled the silence between them. "You okay?" he asked softly. She nodded, unable to speak. Then, almost in a whisper, "What would you have done if I didn't stop you?" Marcus looked ahead, eyes distant. "You did stop me," he said. That's why he's still breathing. They walked into the night, two people carrying very different kinds of strength, bound by a love that the world could neither define nor destroy. The night breeze carried the scent of rain as Alana and Marcus walked down the quiet street. The world outside seemed untouched by what had just happened, but for them everything had changed. The city lights flickered across puddles on the pavement, reflecting her tear-streaked face and his unshakable calm. Marcus didn't speak right away. He knew words couldn't undo what she'd felt. The humiliation, the fear, the helplessness. Some wounds weren't visible, but they left marks deeper than any bruise. When they reached the car, he opened the door for her, his movements gentle, a contrast to the storm that had raged minutes ago. She sat silently, staring at her hands. The faint tremor in her fingers reminded her of how close she'd come to breaking. Finally, she whispered, "I thought if I worked hard enough, people would respect me, that it would be enough." Marcus's jaw tightened. Respect isn't something people like him ever give. They only understand fear and her consequences. She turned toward him, eyes glistening. "But what about you? You didn't have to step in like that. You could have ruined everything." He looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "There are lines, Alana. When someone crosses them, silence becomes part of the crime. I've spent my life watching good people get destroyed because no one said anything. I'm done being quiet." She felt the truth in his words, not just anger, but a kind of sorrow. A lifetime of witnessing injustice in a world that looked the other way. The car's engine hummed softly as they drove through the empty streets. Streetlights passed like slow blinks of time. Alana leaned back, the adrenaline fading, replaced by exhaustion. But beneath it was something new, relief. She wasn't just a victim anymore. She had been seen, defended, valued. At a red light, Marcus reached over, gently taking her hand. "You don't ever go back there," he said. "We'll figure something else out. You don't owe them another second." Tears rolled silently down her cheeks. For the first time that night, she didn't feel small. As dawn began to break, soft pink light touched the horizon. The world felt fragile, quiet after chaos. Marcus parked by the river and they sat in silence, watching the sky shift colors. "Do you ever think people will change?" Alana asked softly. Marcus's eyes stayed on the water. "People, maybe. Systems?" He paused. "That takes generations. But change always starts with someone who refuses to stay silent." She nodded slowly, understanding now that her story, painful as it was, meant something. It wasn't just about what happened in that bathroom. It was about every person who's ever been made to feel powerless, unseen, unworthy. In that moment, the fear that had once gripped her turned into quiet strength. She didn't know what would come next, but she knew one thing for sure. She would never bow her head again. Marcus looked at her, the faintest smile softening his hardened features. "You've got fire in you, Alana," he said. "Don't ever let anyone put it out." The camera would fade on her face, eyes forward, strong, the morning light catching her reflection on the river. A symbol of resilience, because sometimes justice doesn't come from the system. It comes from the courage to fight back, even when no one's watching. And sometimes, it takes a storm to remind the world that silence can be louder than words.